Okay, we are now recording. Are people muted? Okay, everybody's muted for now. Let me give some real quick instruction again. There we go. All right, I got muted. I forgot to unmute myself. It happens a lot. Just real quick here, what we're going to do is go over the how to communicate with us and how to be heard uh, at the end, or when we have discussions or wins. We really want you to share your wins. It's a big part of this. But if you take your cursor, you can see that scooting around there, go to the very bottom of your screen, a bar will pop up, and on the very left, there is the mute button, and you should see a red line through it right now because you are muted, and that's okay. It just keeps the chaos down. Just to the right of the microphone is the video. If you don't want people to see your face, just your name or a blank screen or a picture of you, hit that and a red line will go through it, and we will only see a black screen with your name. You can undo that anytime you like. There, Leah just did that. All right. And if you go a little bit farther to the right, there's chat. It looks like a comic book bubble, okay, a dialogue box. And if you click on that, you can send messages to everybody. The default is everybody. So whatever you type in uh, will be seen by everyone, unless you hit the little tiny drop-down arrow to the right of where it says everyone. You can choose one person to send a message to. Just click on that person's name and you can send it. You can type in questions to me, to IT, or to Randy privately, or to Jerry, and we will read your question for you if you're shy. All right, that's a nice way to do it. Or you can put the question in the chat for everyone to see. Also, a good thing about chat, if we say, hey, we're putting a link in the chat, we're going to put links to today's videos and a very important PDF, Ron's Journal 30, into chat today for you. So if we say, hey, we're putting this in chat, you can go to chat and copy the link or the PDF and just drag it to your computer screen, and it's all yours. We want you to have these references and access to these videos. All right, at the very bottom, go a little bit farther to the right, and there's something called reactions. And if you click on that, you'll see that there are emojis that can also pop into the chat. So if you really like something, you can do the clapping hands or the happy face. If you have a question, you can also, pop a question mark in there. But primarily, if people have questions or want to add a win, which is something we always do here too, is that you can pardon me, you can raise your hand. You just click on the little yellow hand there, and we will see in your box that you want to ask a question, and we will call on you. And we make every effort to call on people, but you might be in a line, so just be patient and we'll make sure to call on you. All right, everybody good? Everybody good? All right, we're going to get started here. Today's talk is the original OT levels, Ls and GPMs, and this is the OT Association, a group of 7 individuals, more like a steering committee, who do projects to help spread standard LRH tech and get tech accepted throughout the world. And if you want to know more about us, you can email any of our OTA members, and we are also in Indie Bridge on Facebook. So look for us there if you're not already a member. All right, well, let's get going here. I'm going to introduce the OT Association. We have Trey Lotz, OT7, Class 9, and also an ELS auditor. He had some appointments today. He isn't going to be with us today, so we're showing his videos instead. We have Randy Smith, who's going to be our main speaker today, OT7, Class 10 auditor, CS, and trainer. And I've done all 3 with Randy, and he's top notch, really is. Z Snyder is OT8, Class 5 grad, and an auditor. Jerry Tunadal, who's here with us today, OT8, Class 9 Auditor and CS. Ingrid Hoffman, OT8 Dianetics Auditor, is here with us today too. And Greg Cohen, OT8 Class 8, excuse me, Class 2. He's one of our members, and my name is Mary Blackford. I'm OT6 currently on Solo Knots. I'm the chair of the OT Association. I'm your MC, and I'm a Class 2, but I'm retraining right now, so I get it all right. All right, so are we ready? Ready to rock and roll? All right, I'm going to introduce Randy Smith. He's going to be taking us through the original OT levels. Okay, what are those? Because we've heard about the new OT levels involving solo knots auditing, but there are some original OT levels introduced about 1978 that we think should be addressed when we talk about Ls and GPMs. So here we go. Randy, take it away.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to this webinar. And many of you know me, but I've been an auditor for about 50 years. And I'm going to talk about the original OT levels. Now, prior to 1978, everyone did Dianetics, and then they did the expanded grades through grade 4. And then they did something called power processing. And then they did the solo auditor course and then grade 6 and the clearing course. And that's how everyone went to clear up until 1978, as far as was known. Now, in 1978, LRH discovered that, wow, a bunch of people have actually achieved clear on Dianetics. This was a huge breakthrough because people had been auditing, many of us co-auditing on Dianetics for hundreds of hours. And anyway, it turned out a bunch of people were clear. And he also discovered that, you know what? It's not a good idea to audit Dianetics on a clear or OT. It can actually be harmful. He discovered this on his own case when he was sick for a little while, and he was getting auditing, and he was doing Dianetics, and then he was getting sicker and sicker, and that's when led him to develop NED for OTs, New Era Dianetics for OTs, a completely new kind of rundown to address OTs. And this, of course, was huge news in 1978. And the original OT levels 1, 2, and 3, these are essentially unchanged since about 1969. We still deliver those essentially the same way. But before LRH discovered NED for OTs in 1978, there were these, we now call them the original OT levels. They're listed on the screen there as number 12, 13, 14, and 15. OT 4, 5, 6, and there was actually a 7 mentioned up there under number 10. These were, we now call them the original OT levels because the church has not delivered these at all since about 1982. In the Church of Scientology, when people, after they go OT3, they're more or less put right on to NED for OTs, which is fine, because Hubbard discovered that you really should handle your NED for OTs case before you do the original OT levels. That's what he implies here on this thing you're seeing the display of, and we have a link to the whole issue that you can get later in the chat. But basically, the situation was we saw a lot of people going through these original OT levels in the 1970s, and they were getting fantastic gains. I saw tremendous changes in people, but then they seem to have trouble. A lot of people tended to have key things in or kind of fall on their head a bit, and it was a bit mysterious until LRH, in his typical way, researched it and made a breakthrough on it. And he discovered there's this whole echelon of case called NED for OTs, which should be handled first. And like he implies here in this issue, after you do NED for OTs, number 11 there, then you should do the OT levels, which we now call the original OT levels, 4, 5, 6, and so forth. Anyway, that is basically the story. Now, what did they address? I'm not going to get into anything confidential, but uh, what these original OT levels address is what we call positive gain. You're all familiar with auditing. Most auditing, like Dianetics and much of Scientology, we're deleting things. We're deleting engrams. We're erasing engrams. We're getting rid of losses. We're deleting locks and secondaries and getting rid of negative considerations or overts and withholds and that kind of thing. Deleting, deleting, deleting. This is what you might call negative gain. Well, now the original OT levels are entirely different. Some of you guys that have had them will be able to give some wins about this. The original OT levels, OT4, especially 5 and 6, these are positive gain. They actually deal with what abilities can an OT expand on? In other words, what can you really do? How can you increase your ability in perception or even operating as an exterior Phaeton? And that's the kind of thing the original OT levels concentrate on, and they're really fantastic. So it's recommended that you do your knots, your in for OTs first. In other words, you handle OT 5, 6, and 7 solo knots. You get that all completed, and then you can do the original OT levels, which are available in the independent field. And then you can get the full gain from those without the liability that people ran into in the 70s. Okay. And if you want to get a little idea of what these original OT levels address, look up Route 1 in the book Creation of Human Ability. Route 1. Now, this is not exactly what they are, but it'll give you a flavor, give you an idea of the kind of thing that they address. And that's all I'll say about the original OT levels. You're muted, Mary.
There. Okay. Right now, if you have any wins, if you've done the original OT levels and have any wins, go ahead and raise your hand or put some, give us a letter
Yes,
Q in the
Ingrid,
chat.
Ingrid,
Ingrid,
raising
Ingrid
her
has
hand.
done them.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
Unmute yourself, Ingrid. Yeah. Or maybe she has to be. There you
Okay,
go.
There.
Yeah.
I think, do you
Yeah.
hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, great. Yes, exactly. I did the original OT levels 4 to 7 after I finished my net for OTs and solo net for OTs. And it was just the perfect moment to do this original OT levels. I had had all these negative gains that Randy talked about. I had gotten rid of all these factors that always disturbed me in all my dynamics, that kept me somehow from doing things and all these things. It was all finished and handled. And I was there just feeling very, of course, very relaxed. It was just such a big win. But at the same time, within some weeks, I thought, now what? I want to do, what can I do now? And I went in contact with Randy and I asked him, can I do the original OT levels with you? So I did that. And for me, the original OT levels really made me walk as an OT. I mean, when you're complete solo knots, you've completed that stuff from before, and now you want to start walking as an OT, but nobody tells you how you do that, right? I mean, you have to find out yourself. So I did this. Original OT5 level, for example, and I'm just reading three or four sentences from what I wrote down at that time. My win from original OT5. I know I don't have to be connected to the physical universe anymore if I don't want to. I can be I can be the physical universe at will or not. No need to be affected to it. Much less need to go into the body again. I feel much bigger as a theta. So this was my main win from that. And it's, as I said, it just made me walk as an OT because after solo node completion, then on the bridge, then you start the full OT levels, and in between these original levels, they're just perfect. So let me tell you another win about original OT7. It's all about intention. And I must say, I've been so much looking forward to that level. I felt I want to, I really want to get back my intention as a Satan, and so when I got it, it was just amazing. I mean, you're just able to cause so many more things again on so many more dynamics after you have rehabilitated your ability to project intention. And it was really a big, big, big difference to before that. And so I'd like to tell you just this tiny little one of a tiny little win from original OT7. I've had all these wins all the time, and I'm still having them. But what happened one day after I finished original OT7, I went into my work. I was working for a small company. I was there at my desk, and I had a plant on my desk which had been there for a long time, doing very well, but didn't do well at that time anymore. And this plant, my boss had given it to me, and he was also a bit sad about it, and he said, "Oh, it doesn't look too well." Anyway, so that day I thought about what can I do for the plant? What could we do to save it? And I thought, well, if we had a second plant to put right next to it as a second terminal, that should make a difference. I didn't say anything to my boss. I didn't mention it. Next morning, I come into my room, and what do I see on my desk? I see a second plant there, a most beautiful red second plant, which he had put there without me saying a word. And that was the first win I had from that, because I could see it really comes through the theta universe. The intention, it just arrives through the theta universe. And even if you don't mention it. So I just wanted to tell you that too.
Very good, Ingrid. Very nice wins.
And I like to say that Randy was my CS on those levels, because I solo audited them. But Randy is a fantastic CS.
Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you so much, Ingrid. That's wonderful. Okay, Randy, it's back to you now. And I think we're moving on to the L's and
Yes.
how those work. Okay, take it
Very
away.
good. Okay. So we're going to talk about the L's. You've all heard about the L's. The L's were developed, and I'm reading from a HCOB 29 July 1984, called the L Rundowns. The L's were developed as a result of research into the levels above OT8. The success of the L's is startling. These rundowns can handle things that are handled nowhere else. The breakthrough, which exists here technically, is so strong that it actually cuts through the normal protective mechanisms of the mind. It came actually from the OT grades. It answers the question, why does an OT restrain himself and cease to behave as an OT? Each rundown is designed to terminatedly handle a specific area of a person's case. The L's are not grades in themselves, but incredible boosters. The basic tech comes from research into increasing OT powers. They're a special class of rundown. They increase a person's power and effectiveness. Part of the discovery was that this tech could be used lower down on the bridge to get people up it faster, very much faster. The L's address the basics of a Thetan's case directly. They undercut the reactive mind and handle those factors which suppress the capacity to actually do, be, and have. They remove those things that can make a person less himself and far less powerful and causative as a Thetan. These rundowns are designed to find and erase the basic counter-intentions along one's dynamics. They stabilize a case. Now, where can they be delivered? We're going to be seeing some video from Trey Lotz where he talks about this, but according to Trey, they're best done after grade 4 or after solo knots. He'll discuss this further in the videos. Now, the next L, the first one that's usually delivered is L11. This is also called the New Life Rundown. The New Life Rundown was developed to give a person a new life. This means it can handle that part of an individual's case which stops him from really living. It handles the major source of aberration upon which attention is fixed, blasting apart that major personal stumbling block. And we provided a link in the chat later to these issues so you can read them in their entirety. Or at least that's the reference given at the bottom to this I'm reading from. Now, the next rundown is L12, and that's the next one. The intention behind L12 is to make a fully extroverted and stable Thetan. This rundown aims at handling very basic and specific aspects of a person's beingness. Here are those case things which tend to capture part of the person's attention, so he has much less of it to put on life and doingness. With L12, the person experiences certainty and unshakability as a being with the ability to handle his own universe. Then the third rundown that's done is L10. And L10 is the last one, and it's a bit longer than the other two. L10 is designed to handle the things the Thetan uses to restrain himself. The person regains his ability and power to do those things he intends to do, and as a result, he feels more at cause than ever before. L10 is an action that really releases a person's power on the third and fourth dynamic. It takes off the stops that hold a person back on these dynamics. L10 will boost the individual's confront and responsibility level and consequently raise his doingness level. Yeah, one win that I heard from someone who had finished the L's was, well, when I want to do something, I will just do it. It's that simple. Now, next we're going to listen to a video recorded by Trey Lotz. Mary, would you like to introduce that a little bit?
Sure. First, I'd like to give a win because I've done L11.
Oh, sure. Go ahead.
And it's L11 tends to be a little shorter, well, maybe a lot shorter than the other L's, but it reached the foundations of who I am as a being. I found out my relationship and my role and where I stand in relation to the rest of life. And I'm not gonna give any spoilers, but it was remarkable and foundation. I mean, just shakes you right to your core, these winds. But L11 was just very profound for me.
Very
And I
good.
highly recommend it. I highly recommend it. Now we do have one more slide, Randy, and let me go ahead and does anybody else have a win to say real quick on any L they've done? Because we're going to stop in between these videos of Trey.
Yeah,
There's part 1, 2, and 3. They're each about 10, 11, maybe 13 minutes long, but we're going to stop in between and we can discuss or
share
explain
wins.
or share wins.
Yes.
Anybody else right now? IT, we got anybody in the queue? All right, we're just gonna go ahead then. Let's see here. We did move this. This explains the L's.
Yeah, and this, I think I covered this pretty much.
I think so. Yeah, but you can find the references to the L's in RJ30, LRH ED 301.
And we've sent that out, a link to that in the chat. Now that
There is a link in the chat for you, right?
yes.
And I wasn't expecting to put the entire L's intros into the chat, so we don't have that prepared, but I will email it out. How about
Okay.
that?
Sounds
Okay,
good.
all right. If you're here, you're going to get it. All right, let's try the next one. So what is the relationship of L's to GPMs?
Oh,
And
yes.
that's something that Trey's going to address too.
Yeah. So GPM stands for goals, problem, mass. And I'm just going to read a quick definition from the technical dictionary. LRH did a lot of research on these in the early 60s, especially, and Trey will talk about this a bit and how they relate to the L's. But to give you a quick definition of goals, problem, mass, it's a goal has been balked for eons by opposing forces. The balked is, of course, checked or slowed. A goal pointed one way, the opposing forces point exactly opposite against it. If you took two fire hoses and pointed them at each other, their streams would not reach each other's nozzles, but would splatter against one another in midair. If this splatter were to hang there, it would be a ball of messed up water. Call Jose the force the PC has used to execute his goal. Call Hose B the force other dynamics have used to oppose that goal. Where these two forces have perpetually met, a mental mass is created. This is a picture of any problem, force opposing force with resulting mass. Now, when you have the PC's goal meeting constant opposition, you have in the reactive mind the resulting mass caused by the two forces, goal and opposition to it. This is the goal problem mass. So that's all I'll say about that. Trey will expand on that a bit more in his talks. Okay?
Okay. Thank you, Randy. That was a great definition.
Great.
All right. So this little scrap of video, it's part 1 of 3. It's called About L Rundowns, and we're going to put the link to these videos into chat afterward. You don't have to connect them now. We have them here for you. And please realize that this was recorded in 2010 at the Free Zone Convention in Reno, Nevada. And I think we have the people who put on the Free Zone Convention here in the room with us. Yeah. So, hey, Ray, how you doing? And the introduction to this 2010 talk, the woman introducing Trey Lots is Anita Warren. So turn up the volume a little bit and put your listening ears on. I'm going to go ahead and play this for you.
Give you one of the greatest auditors I know is Trey Lots.
So great to be here. Particularly a treat to be here with my friend John and Bergia. I got in Scientology in 1969. A friend of mine told me about the books, and I bought all the books and I took them back read them all, and went in and started a course. And John was running a little mission there that I got into, and he was just very impressive as an OT. I've been reading about OTs, but just a couple of little interesting things. You know, I was a very brand new person, obviously, and John could, you know, you could take a book that you were reading, and he could spot what words you misunderstood because you left a little mass on the word. For some reason, that was real to me. And also, he'd give these little lectures on Friday night, and you just walk into the room in the afternoon, he'd look around and say, put out 28 chairs. And 28 people would show up, because people would put their mass in the room before coming. And then he said one time that he never ended off a lecture until everybody in the audience was exterior. So I don't mean to put pressure on you, John. You'll really enjoy his talk later. About 3 years ago, I connected up with Pierre, and I asked him to audit me on the L's. I'd always wanted them, but I never really had the money for them. And so he did that. He audited me on L11. We got a good comedy offer to train me on doing the L's. And so when he came out to LA, he finished my L12 and L10, and also trained me on how to deliver the L's. And I thought it was a fascinating technology. Of course, I understood a lot of it. A lot of the techniques are not unknown. You know, listing and nulling, two-way com, W, date, locate. You know, there's some new and different techniques that are not anywhere else on the bridge. And there's some interesting data in the L's material that LRH wrote. But it isn't like there's a lot of data. There's rundowns of what you're supposed to do. But all of the research that the L's were based on all goes back earlier. Also, I found the L's a little mysterious. And that's not an untypical reaction. Many people I've audited kind of come out of session and go, wow, that was really great. And, you know, they're talking to somebody else in there, and he says, no, what are we doing here? What was this all about? You know, or you talk to people who had their L's, and you say, yeah, they were great. I can't remember a thing about them, you know. and it's almost hard to find anybody who does remember anything about them. Well, there's an interesting reason for that. One of the things you blow on the L's is valences. Well, one of the things that a valence is it's something that knows more than you do. It knows better than you do. And that's why you use it. So when you blow it, you blow all that knowingness. That's true. But you could see LRH pushing it. You could, you know, the basic tech underlying the L's kind of really goes all the way back to the early 50s, where even in fundamentals of thought, where it always talks about games and no games. We have allies and opponents and teammates and opponents and enemies, and that's really the basis. See, he was sort of onto that as a real key piece of data. And even at that time, like if you understood game theory, you know, you understood, you know, you were for something, you were against something. There's things you could grant beingness to. There's things you couldn't grant beingness to, didn't want to. Things you were trying to block, people that were trying to block you. When you didn't want somebody to win or they didn't want you to win. See, this really ties in with all you can see this is all audited on the grades too, because you're not in common with people that are opponents. You know, you don't want to be in common with enemies. You have problems with people that you're opposing, and people who oppose you have a problem with you. Blocking, same thing. And who do you have secrets from? Your opponents. So they don't. And also people that you're unwilling to help, or people that you're willing to help. So when you're running help processes, you know, like how could blank help you, how could you, you know, identities that you're trying to be, identities that you're trying to help when you're running help flows, you're running off any old games that you've got that are residual, that are getting in the way of your being in present time and doing what you're supposed to be doing. Also, any overt is an effort to solve a problem. So if you've got problems with somebody, you're going to be committing overts and having withholds. And then, as the problem's great, of course, then ARC breaks. Alright, tells an interesting little story about ARC breaks. He says, these really severe ARC breaks, the one that just really fries your ass, you know. He says it's like the guy's there, and then out of the gloom comes this big ocean liner sized piece of charge, and it kind of moves in silently, and you just touch the edge of it, and you go like that. And when you assess it, you know, ARCU, and okay, that's an enforced reality, moves back out into the night. And that's how he describes what an ARC break is you like just catching the edge of one of these GPMs. And a surfax were, it was considered at one point that you were clear when you handled your surfact, because that was the present time lock of your present time GPM. That was the GPM that was affecting you in present time, was your surfact. See, so he was really pushing in this direction. And you know, and I did the briefing course, and you know, you follow this sequence of development, and then around 1960, 61, he got into goals, and then goals auditing, you know, R212, and many of you here went through that. I was talking with Mary about that, and audited on R212 and some of these other processes that developed out of that. It was 62, 63, 64. By 65, it just sort of disappeared, you know, because that was the end of the tape series. Everything after that was confidential, the R6 tapes and the R6 bank and clearing course, and that was all confidential. So he said, well, where did all of this GPM research go to? Was it just abandoned, or did it just kind of end up as OT2 or OT3 or the clearing course? Well, after LH did all that, in 1970 he wanted to develop a rundown that would allow people to boom orgs. He wanted to have executives who could push an intention down the line and make things happen. So he took all of this research that he'd done on the GPMs, and he extracted out of that the L's tech. His original intention for the GPMs section of the bank, because there's a bullet around the title. He says that your case is like you do your grades, you go clear, you handle your OT case, you know, your NOTS case, then you handle your GPM bank. And he says in the L's material that the L's material is taken from OT 9 through 15, and that was the intention, was to, once the person had all of their OT case out of the way, that you could now handle your GPM track. Now this is different than your NGRAM bank or your R6 bank, which you handle over on the bridge. These things are still there. So, GPMs. I'd always, you know, just taken that regular definition, the person has a goal and they have a problem and they develop some mass. But it didn't explain a lot to me. And so what I decided to do, because I got so curious about this tech and what was happening and why, that I went back and I started rereading all the GPM stuff. And you can see a lot of the things, knowing the LSAC, you can see a lot of the areas that he took stuff from. Out of these, like at one point he'll say, yeah, when you really get the item, you get the meter will blow down. If it doesn't blow down, you don't have the item, you know. And he says, yeah, when you really want to blow one of these things, the needle goes very free. So you have to remember, in 1963, 1964, there were no laws of listing and nulling. That's why some people got in trouble listing goals. And there was also no FNs, no releases. So by the time all these technical things had been worked out, and he revisited his earlier research, which LRH has done quite a lot. He's gone back and he's kind of brought it into the present technical environment and figured out a rundown on how to run this. But a GPM, it's a mass that accumulates after the postulation of a goal resulting in problems. Now here's the real key thing that made me understand it. These problems are not the problems of postulate counter-postulate. They're identity counter-identity. A GPM is an identity versus an identity. There is a postulate and a counter-postulate, but that's junior, that's embedded in the identity. So when you're handling your GPM bank, you're handling your identities. Now, I'll read, there's a real good explanation here. I'll read you a little bit from this tape here. It's called Goals, Problem, Mass, in February of '63. He says he makes a postulate, he becomes an identity to make the postulate stick. And in the process of doing that, he is opposed by various elements. Out of his own imagination or the determination of others, which causes an opposition identity to materialize. The presence of the opposition makes the person believe that to accomplish his goal, he must now become another identity. And this new identity gets a new opposition, which causes him to have a new identity.
Okay. Do we have any questions, any discussion, any wins? Remember, we've got the raise hand feature on the bottom right of your screen there, or you can just type it into the chat and we'll pick it up.
Yeah, especially any wins that people have had L's that they would like to share so far.
IT, anybody in the queue? Okay. Okay, if there's no questions or discussion or wins,
I would like to just give a couple
sure.
definitions for some of the newer people. He mentions the
Absolutely.
term valence. And I would just like to give a little definition of valence, what is meant by a valence, okay, in Scientology auditing. And it has to do with identity, which he's discussing. A valence means a personality. The term is used to denote the borrowing of the personality of someone else. A valence is a substitute for self taken on after the fact of lost confidence in self. For example, a pre-clear in their father's valence, they're acting as though they were their father. So that's an example of a valence. Okay. Another term he mentions is service fac. And I'll give you a definition of a service fac. It's short for service facsimile. It's a computation generated by the individual to make self right and others wrong. This, it can also involve something that one uses to dominate others or to escape domination and to enhance one's own survival. This computation will cause the individual to deliberately hold in restimulation selected parts of his reactive mind to explain his failures in life. For example, a person may keep an old injury in restimulation so that his family has to look after him. That might be an example of a service facsimile. It's called service because it serves him, facsimile because it's from mental image picture form. So that's what service fac is. Okay? Very good. Let's go to part two.
We do have a hand raised here.
Okay, great.
iPhone Susie. IT, you got that? All right. Go ahead and
Unmute yourself, Susie.
Unmute yourself, Suze. Did she,
She's still muted according to the screen.
yeah, bottom left corner of your screen down there, click on the microphone with the red line through it and
Where it
wait a
says,
moment and it will unmute you.
or you can put the question or in chat if you want to, or it may be a win she wants to share.
Okay. Can we, can we see, is Sue unmuted yet?
No, she's not unmuted yet.
Okay, I'll tell you what, let's go on to the next video and Sue, you will have a chance to ask questions or tell wins in a little bit, but we're
Oh,
gonna go on.
here's her question.
Oh wait, here she is. Okay, okay, good, thank you.
How is a valence different from a life continuum? Good, that's a good question. Now, a life continuum is a particular phenomenon Hubbard discovered, and I'll just give a quick definition of that, where let's say someone close to you passes away, and then you decide, I'm going to, let me just get to an exact definition here. One individual attempting to carry on the life of another deceased individual or departed individual by means of generating in his own body the infirmities and mannerisms of the deceased or departed individual. So, for example, let's say someone close to you passes away and you desperately want to carry on their life. So you take on uh, some of the illness symptoms or mannerisms of this deceased person, and you dramatize those a bit. That's what we call a life continuum, because it's like you're trying to continue their life by taking on. Another example is somebody fails, departs, or dies, and then the individual takes on the burden of this person's habits, goals, fears, etc. Now, Susie's question was, how's a valence different from an identity? Well, that's Stephen's question. Yeah. How's it different from a life continuum? Well, it's very similar. In fact, you might say a life continuum would be example of a valence. You're taking on somebody else's mannerisms or identities or characteristics. But there can be different kinds of valences. I remember one time I was in high school and I really admired this one teacher who was very impressive and everything. And one day, a friend of mine and I were walking down the hall in the high school, and he said, "You know, you're walking just like Mr. Hartenstein walks." And I was shocked, but I realized, oh, I am. I had taken on part of the identity of this teacher who had been very impressive to me. So that was an example of a valence. Okay. Uh, Stephen Lumiere has a question. How is valence different from an identity? Good. Well, identity is a category of beingness. It's like, I am a fisherman. That would be an identity. Okay. Or I am a priest, or I am a grocery clerk, or any category of beingness where you identify yourself as something. That's an identity. The valence can be an example of this, but it's usually one that's taken on after a lost confidence in self. Now, maybe all identities are taken on in that fashion, but that's basically the difference. Okay, so that's all I'll say on that. I think Trey will develop this a bit more in part two. We should probably move on to that.
Okay, let's go on here. Again, this is part two of Trey Lotz's talk from the 2010 Free Zone Convention. about L rundowns. Oh, it works. Yes, I'm so excited. Okay.
At least for you, there's no liability to it. Once you enter a game, there's responsibility and there's liability. The first step of a game, as I say, is the Satan makes a postulate, and then he assumes an identity. And once you've assumed an identity, once you've decided to be something, by definition, you've also decided not to be something else. So whatever you are, you're not something else. Now, abilities, valences always have abilities, things they can do and things they can't do. But in order to have a game, you see, you jump into a game, you have to leave this side of the game uncontrolled. You can control this side of the game and you have allies, but you leave this side of the game uncontrolled. And that's where originally you're responsible for the whole game because you envisioned the game and you postulated, but then you jump in and have an identity, and that is where pan-determinism deteriorates. See, originally the word other determinism meant that you decided that there's some other determinism in the game other than yourself. It doesn't mean controlled by the other. It originally just meant abandoning an area of the game to control. So somebody else is controlling that. So somebody else is controlling that side of it. Then, of course, you're here, you're self-determined, you're putting some action over in this direction and you're getting some action in this direction. You know, you've got painful things that you're giving and you've got painful things that you're receiving in the game. And you're not willing to experience those effects, and really you're not willing to experience those effects either. So this becomes mysterious to you and sort of a vacuum because you're withholding yourself from that end. So eventually you sort of flip over and become that side of the equation, and you become the thing that you oppose. And then the whole cycle kind of flips back again, but it doesn't flip back exactly the same. It flips back like this. Back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, over a long period of time, until you get down here. And what that is, that's like total failure, total stop. And so if he takes a look at that, what the? I don't like this at all. I'm going to play a new game. I have an even better idea. I'm going to be an entirely new person. What about this thing over in the corner here? No, we didn't remember anything about that. So all that knowingness, all that memory is now over there. Now he's still creating it, but he's no longer controlling it. He doesn't even remember it. So what does it become? It becomes a valence that goes on automatic. So if the game was war, then when he's confronted with a situation where there's war, one of these valences will kick in. Because what's a valence? Valence is simply a substitute for self taken on after the fact of lost confidence in self. Once you lose confidence in your ability to handle a situation or play a game, you set up a valence to do it. Once that valence fails, it goes on automatic, but then it sort of activates automatically anyway, and you start handling things the way that valence would handle it. And that's how, where you get these how people act differently in different situations. They're not consistent in their personality or the way they handle life. Now, when you audit these things, they'll just blow. And what is the blows? It could be like hundreds of lifetimes. See, that's why you can't really run it out dianetically, because it isn't an incident. It's a whole bunch of collapsed incidents. And not only a bunch of collapsed incidents, it's a bunch of collapsed identities. It isn't even just one identity. It's all these things locked in like that. In other words, it describes them as like kind of like gray masses and things like that. And the remarkable thing about the L's is that you can get them to come up at all because you've forgotten about them. You've buried them deep. And I remember we were running something on L12. It was called a character rundown. It was a very fascinating rundown. It's a list of identities. It's a prepared list of identities that are very early on the track that a being reacted to, and it formed his basic personality.
Wow.
And it's a very interesting and in some ways obscure list. You know, you really have to look up some words and figure out what the hell these things are. But and the thing is to spot what, you know, there were stimulators connected with them. So I remember we were auditing something. Something came up like a goat. You know, a reading item, a goat. Okay, so I get the question, you know, okay, what past identity was a goat? I was out like a light. I was like at the bottom of some pit, and I couldn't even, and I had to really strain to even think of what the question was. I couldn't think of an answer. And all of a sudden, something, you know, I could see something kind of form there, you know, and well, what was it? I mean, these concepts, these thought concepts, they're not in English, you know, but it's an energy. So can you identify what is that energy, you know? And so you start to list, and so you know, it could be this, is it this? No, this. You're listing and nulling, and all of a sudden, an angry policeman, you know. All the unconsciousness blew, and it's still what the hell. But nevertheless, the win was all right. That's what it was. And here comes the next question: what would oppose an angry policeman? A sneaky thief, you know. I don't know, but anyway. Well, you know, you do this. I mean, I think we did something like 800 listing and nulling actions, because you're doing like 6, 7 an hour, and I did about 120 hours on it. It was very thorough. These things do exist. They're there. It's hard to get them to come up sometimes. Sometimes they're just on the surface and they glow. But see, a valence is a synthetic beingness, and it isn't necessarily a real person, but it's maybe what you thought that person was. And it's a package of characteristics. It has a complete bank. As I said, it knows something very well. It knows it better than you do. It solves a problem. That's very important. That's why they're kind of hard to blow sometimes, because you see this thing is solving this thing. If you blow this thing, you got this problem now, so you got to blow this, and then you got to blow that. And then the whole thing blows. And Elroy says, look, this is not a permanent solution. 200 trillion years from now, you're going to have a few of these things. But once they unravel like that, you can't put them back together, even if you wanted to, but you don't. And but not only that, but you know, it's almost hard to. How did we get there, and what was that, and you know, who was that masked man? You know.
Okay, Randy, we're up to some questions, discussions, and wins if people want to share. Have we got anything in chat or any hands raised? Oh, Jerry. Yes. Unmute
Yeah,
yourself,
hi.
darling. Yeah, hi.
I could share my L12 win, or parts
Yay.
of it at least.
Okay.
So for me, the first win I wrote down about L12 was, it felt like I regained my ability to pull myself out of valences or identities, like at will. Almost like taking off a t-shirt, only me being the t-shirt, so to speak. And so I could just do that with whatever identity I wanted to pull myself out of, which was really cool.
Very cool. Very
One of
good.
the main identities I did pull myself out of was the identity of being a great guy, or this good person, always fighting and working on being a good person, being this, oh, well, would a great guy do that? Maybe not. And this constant struggle. And so for me, getting rid of that identity was very freeing, because now I could do whatever I wanted or what I felt like. And ever since then, I've been this horrible person. I've been this obnoxious little
No.
ass. I loved L12, and I did it with Trey, and he's just so good.
Very good, Jerry.
Thank you. Any other wins or questions? See, let me have a look at the chat here.
Nothing new in the chat showed up yet.
Okay, all righty, we're good. Well, good. If we're done with that for the moment, shall we go on to the next video?
Yes.
What
Oh,
was
there's a
there?
hand. Danny
Oh, there
has
is a
a hand
hand.
Unmuting myself
Thank you.
because, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Hi,
Yeah,
Danny.
sorry, I illegally unmuted myself because I wasn't noticed immediately. Okay.
Illegal stuff. Oh my gosh. Okay, it's fine. We want to
Go.
hear your voice.
Thank you. Yeah, just a question, and maybe this will, not become something feasible, or perhaps in the future, I don't know. Right now, the only person that I know is auditing the Ls is Trey, right? So this, of course, makes distribution a bit difficult on the larger scale. And besides that, I would love for it to become available somehow to be audited remotely, because that has been working so phenomenally for me between Randy and me. And because, of course, getting to LA will be could prove some difficulty, from people from the other end of the world. So I don't know if this is something that is being thought about, or in some way.
Yeah, I'd like to answer that, Mary, if I may.
Of course.
Yeah, that's a very good question. There are just a few people who are delivering the Ls. That's right. And Trey is probably, as far as I know, the most trustworthy, the most experienced outside of the church to deliver the Ls. He gets uniformly very good results. But that's part of the purpose of this OT committee is we are and we are very interested in expanding the delivery capability of all parts of the bridge. So we are working on projects to expand the L capability. I can't go into more detail about that, but it is very needed, and it will be done. Okay.
Okay, I'm just happy that that you say that you are already thinking about it, and
Yes,
and see how that could be a possibility in the future. Okay, thank you very much.
you're very welcome. Sure.
Thanks, Danny.
And I see Leah has commented in the chat that she's translating the L's for Italy.
Wonderful.
She's using the references on Red Volume 14. She says, am I all right, or there are some other materials to look at? My answer to that is, yeah, there is something called OT Volume 14. It's not completely trustworthy, as far as I know, as far as the actual data about the OT levels. It's a start, but Trey, as far as I know, has the most complete collection of references on and know-how about how to deliver the Ls, and so that's part of our project. We're working on that. There's another comment from Kovadonga that Ron's org in Grenchen is delivering the Ls to Russian auditors and Eastern auditors.
Okay.
Yeah.
there's a lot more tech going on out there than we realize, and that's another reason we have the OT Association,
Yes,
to get people in touch with each other, and let us know that, we're not alone. We're
that's
not alone,
right.
and there are resources and reliable resources.
Yes.
So that is part of our purpose.
How are we doing on time overall, Mary?
Well, it's almost 1:15 here, that's Central Time. If people can hang on for another 15 minutes, we've got one more video of Trey Lott's part 3 of his talk to show you.
Yes.
I do have another video, and I think maybe if people are interested in seeing it, I'll show it after we've wrapped up with wins and whatnot. But if people can hang out for another 15, we'll get most of our intention and purpose done here.
Sounds good. Let's go ahead with that. Yeah.
Okay, all right. And again, about L rundowns, part 3, Trey Lots at the 2010 Free Zone Convention.
Hard to get a withhold off. But she always isn't getting withholds off you. She's not in a hurry.
Oh,
She gets secrets, She's a spy. Not really, but she's preparing for the next war, you see. So people have these future identities, they're space jockeys before they're spaceships. It's just valences. And the other thing that he related to valences is circuits. And see, the difference between a valence and a circuit is a valence is something you are, and a circuit is something that talks at you or modifies you. A circuit modifies a valence. It upregulates it or downregulates it, enforces it or inhibits it. Just the other day I was auditing somebody, and they had a criticalness circuit. It was always telling them that they were wrong and didn't know what they were doing and better think about it again. It's pretty common, critical valence. Well, what were you, or it's a critical circuit, but what kind of valence would that modify? Well, a perfect valence. Somebody who's perfect. See, the valence is perfect, but the circuit reminds them they're not perfect. So, if you're trying to handle the circuit, you're only trying to handle half the problem. What's the circuit? How is the circuit a solution? And what valence is it a solution to? And those are some of the things that also blow on the L's too, because you get this whole hierarchy of subsidiary solutions to this big main GPM problem that you have. So anyway, it's so much fun to audit. I don't know, it's just, it's a sort of a simple procedure, but, there's so many big wins. I mean, I audited for 38 years in the church, mostly grade auditing and book one, life repair, intro auditing. So when I learned how to do the L's and knots, well, this is great. It was a whole new realm of auditing, and it was the most fascinating auditing I've ever done, and also really the biggest wins that people have had. That just short sessions every time, that people just blown out. It's really, really quite amazing. One of the misconceptions that people have, like particularly on L10, is that you're going to find out all these terrible things you've done, because the data on this floating around is it's all about overage, Well, really, it's not all about overage. What's interesting about it, remember when I was saying that you've got the key thing is the identity. Well, you find an identity, you get the overage of that identity. See, the overages aren't basic. The identity is basic. And you only do the OWs to unburden the identity. So you can get the postulate or the purpose and blow it, and that blows the whole package. Once you do that on both sides of the package, it blows the whole package. And one of my favorite success stories was this woman named Yin. some of you may have seen her success story. I audited her on the L11. Anyway, after we finished and she attested, I always announced people to anybody who's waiting in my living room. And so she said, yeah, well, she worked in this office and they used to always get this promo from Flag about the elves, and there was a guy on the cover, you know, he was like this, and she said, well, what's that all about, you know, and it was kind of annoying to her, really. She said, but now I finished my L11. You know, tying in with what Dexter was saying, it's an interesting question. I mean, if you didn't have any the GPMs, you know, and I'm not sure it's an achievable point to say you have no GPMs. Maybe so. If you clear OT, you have no time track, you know, maybe you've got no GPMs. But you've got a few left, you got a few left. But in any case, what would life be like? Well, Ulrich says that your best games are really against the physical universe, but not really against other people. And so, yeah, what's wrong with universal goodwill? Like Dexter was talking about, you know. I think it's a good idea. And the other thing is, I had a friend who had a bunch of L's, and somebody asked him what he got out of it. He says, you know, when I need to do something, I just do it. Now, that was pretty profound. And one time somebody asked me too, and I had to think about it. I said, well, what does it feel like after? And I said, you know what? I feel really normal. So, once you've blown this kind of case, you're able to have a lot more continuation in your life, a lot more continuity. You have a continuity of self. You're you in different situations. You're not shifting around and being different people or different identities. You're just you all the time. And that really feels very normal. Anyway, is there any questions? Yeah?
You brought up that when you blow off one of these sort of the synthetic penises you take on, the valence, that the knowledge and experience kind of goes away because that's part of the valence. Does that mean to say somebody is all-knowing university professor or something or other, that all of a sudden he's got to go back to elementary school?
Well, no, because I don't think that would be, that probably wouldn't be the blowdown after an item. That's just his profession.
Okay, well I realize he's not going to lose his service.
No. What's going to be the blowdown item? The know-it-all. That's going to blow.
Not the knowledge. Okay. Even with that identity, that gains that knowledge.
Yeah, it's being a combination of different identities. But it's that one that's screwing him up, not his knowledge. It's his know-it-all attitude that's screwing him up. Yeah. All right, well, I really enjoyed speaking with you and look forward to the rest of the event.
Okay, those are the three talks that Trey had about the elves. And do we have any more questions or discussion or wins here? Any hands raised? IT, we got anybody in the queue? Okay.
I think Ray Robles raised his hand.
Yeah, Ray, this was filmed at your Free Zone convention in 2010.
Yes, it was. That's
Yeah.
my film.
Yes. Yeah.
I wish it would have been done a little better, but it was pretty good, you know. And I always liked Trey Lott's talks, you know. Yeah, I had a great win on the L's. Is that what we're doing now? Sharing that win?
Yes,
right?
yes.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes, I got the L's in 1990 actually with Jeannie Hansen. Anybody know Jeannie Hansen? Anyway, she was trained by what's his name? Russell Meadows, who was first class 12, one of the first class 12s. And anyway, I went from my win is I went from a field auditor in San Francisco Bay Area to an international field auditor. I mean, my space and my beingness expanded tremendously. And yeah, I was traveling to Europe. I went to New Zealand. I went to all over the place, halfway around the world, auditing people and doing my thing, because that's all I've been doing for 50 years. And so you're being
Oops. Okay, I think we just lost Ray.
He's
So-
reconnecting.
He's reconnecting. Okay.
Hi,
We'll let him
Ray.
in as soon as he's available.
on TV.
Oh, there you
Keeps
are.
going
Okay.
out. Anyway, where was I? Anyway, my beingness and doingness totally expanded from field auditor to international field auditor. And so I had two missions when I was in the church, but this left everything in the dust, because I did everything up to OT7 in the church and knots. The L's left everything in the dust as far as I'm concerned, and it's really fantastic stuff. And also, I wanted to hopefully you guys promote not only Trey Lots, but there are other people too that are doing it in the field. I think that's a good idea.
Very good. Thank you very much, Ray.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Ray.
Thank
Great
you.
to see you.
Yeah. Good to see you
Okay.
guys.
Yeah. Okay. Are there any other anybody else with a hand raised or in the chat? IT, we got anybody lined up? Okay. Well, going once, going twice. Okay. All right. If you want to read a really good example of a valence, I'm reading Patrick Stewart's autobiography called Make It So, and he talks about his father, and his father was very much in the valence of being a major general from the Second World War, and how this impacted his life later, because that valence, after it worked for him in the army. When he got out of the army, it became rather twisted valence. And I just thought that was a really good example of taking on a valence and maintaining it. Because Patrick Stewart was really shocked later on when his father moved and mother moved to a different little place to live. His father started growing orchids, and it was like, I never knew my father would do that. And he's growing sunflowers. I never expected my father to do that. This is how strong that sergeant major valence was. So, but it was very interesting. Okay, well, anybody else? Okay, well, let's go on here. Okay, we have a recommended set of videos that are accessible on YouTube. It's it's a great interview with Trey Lots. There are two parts: Living from a Theta Viewpoint, Part 1, and Living from a Theta Viewpoint, Part 2. In particular, if you look at Part 2, he has a great description on the L's and GPMs. And Randy, I'm wondering about all our guests here too. Do we have time to look at that, or should we just go to wins and pop these into the chat for people to copy and watch later? What would you like to do? It's 6 minutes. It's 6 minutes. Or did you want to talk some more?
A total of 6 minutes?
Yeah, just a little excerpt.
Let's go ahead and play it if it's just 6 minutes long.
Okay, I think it's a wonderful interview. It was done in 2018 by Sue Young and Nikki Lotz, and he covers again valences. So let's see here. But we will put Part 1 and Part 2 links into the chat for those of you who would like to see those later.
I've been auditing the L's now for about 10 years, and I've probably done about 8,000 hours of L's auditing. Now, the L's some of my earlier lectures, if you've listened to any of my earlier lectures on the L's, excuse me, the L's have to do with GPMs. And GPMs consist of two layers, two levels. There's actual GPMs, which is the person's own track, their own history. And then there's artificial or implant GPMs, which are implants, or which are GPMs that were artificially installed in people's mind, and they were designed and patterned to graft onto actual GPMs because they're of the same pattern, so they kind of hang together. Now the GPMs are old games. Every game that you've ever played, you've got a little a whole bunch of time track, which has all been put in a you could call it a legacy box. You know, it's a little box with all these memories in it. Could be like 100,000, 200,000 years, and many identities, all of which are in part of a game, back and forth in some game. And but unraveling, dismantling those is what you're doing with the L's. It's really what you're doing with any of your auditing, because the person's case is their GPM case, and every little piece of the auditing tech fits into the GPM bank. You could think of the GPM as kind of like a Mr. Potato Head. You know, it's the potato that the nose and the eyes and the eyebrows and the hair and the ears, everything is stuck in there. The ARC breaks, the problems, the withholds, everything is like, but the core of it is the GPM. So that's what you're auditing. But now, what does this do for you? But because that's the important point. Well, when you've got old games that you've been playing for a long time, they become habits and routines. So it's very easy to get stuck in those old games, which means you're stuck in a viewpoint, you're stuck in a cycle of action, you've got habits and routines that are very hard to change. Now this is an ongoing game. Well, there are a lot of other dormant games that were part of your past track, like if you were a fighter pilot, you were playing the fighter pilot game. Well, you could have been a fighter pilot, you could have been a race car driver, all part of the same GPM. Well, this doesn't necessarily apply when you're an 8-year-old kid. You know, you might like to get in your little tricycle and ride around, and maybe that kind of starts to key it in. But you know, when you get into your car, then you're kind of like Space Commander, you know, and you're driving through the you're in a spaceship, you know, you're back in the spaceship driving through traffic. Of course, you don't really realize that, but that's really what you're doing. And sometimes I look over at Nikki when she's driving. I'm going, oh, Space Commander Nikki. And then she laughs because, you know, she knows it's true. But anyway, so once you dismantle those and discharge those, you have a lot more freedom of choice of what games you're playing and what games you're not playing. It's much easier to change your habits and routines and replace old ones with new ones that work better for you. But the other thing is you're surrounded with people who are also playing these old GPM games. And when somebody's playing an old GPM game, they need an opponent. They gotta have an opponent. And that opponent is gonna be you, if you allow it. And if you're not aware of it, it's very easy to get drawn into it. So all of a sudden you find yourself sucked into somebody else's game, playing somebody else's game, and it isn't a game that has anything to do with you and isn't really a game that you want to play. So when somebody, you know, attacks you, when you've got this mechanism, it's in full play, you attack back, then you're in it. And the hardest thing in life is somebody comes at you or gets in your face and you stay exterior. I don't know if you could say it doesn't bother you because it affects your organism. You know, you get the energy, you're subjected to the energy of that end theta or that attack or that hostility or whatever. But it passes very quickly and you don't feel a need really to pick up the gauntlet and smack them back. On the other hand, you can smack them back if you want to. If you want to play the game, you can probably win it. And Alaray said that too. You know, he said, you know, if you decide to play a game, play it to win it. If you don't want to play the game, don't play the game. It's a skill and an ability. It's a power of choice. How do you get this power of choice? By running out past decisions and ongoing cycles of action, habits and routines, things that are on automatic, that are just in play without you really consciously thinking about it or consciously deciding on it. So that's the other thing. Because of course it relates to.
Okay, I decided to stop that there because he goes into another talk about exteriorization, but we have put links to these videos, part 1 and part 2 of this interview with Trey, and this particular 6-minute segment is at the beginning of part 2, and we hope you enjoy it, but you can copy it, it's in the chat. But after all that, Randy, have you got anything else to add? And I think we can take questions and answers once again before we wrap it up.
Yeah, nothing else to add today.
Wonderful. Randy, thank you for walking us through all this. This is a lot to absorb, especially for newer Scientologists. But yeah, the discovery of the L's and the new OT levels and just acknowledging the fact that there were original OT levels that can still be delivered. I mean, and GPMs, that's an awful lot of data at once. And we hope if any of you have questions that you will get in touch with us at info@indiebridge.org. Talk to Randy, one of our tech terminals, or Jerry Tunadal, who is also highly trained. You can get answers to these questions, get them squared away. All right. So let's see. IT, we got people in the queue here, I think, do we? No? Okay. I see a couple things in the chat, but I guess it's not questions.
Just acknowledgments pretty much so far. Yeah.
All right. Wonderful.
Yeah,
Thank
I
you so
wanted to
much.
say,
Oh,
I wanted
sure.
to say
Go ahead.
something. Can you hear me?
Yeah, Susie.
Yeah,
Hi.
hi. It's Susie. I wanted to actually back up what Jerry said about his win, because I always think
Turn
it's
off
so
recording.
phenomenal when you've had the same win somebody else has had off of the levels of auditing that you've had, and you share that same phenomenon as a win.